phrase, my go-to with my clients take the piss out of me, is action. I'm just always saying, well, take action. You've just got to do it.
Yeah.
How can we do it? Because as soon as you take action, things start to happen.
Yes.
And self-doubt is the killer of confidence. So if you find yourself going, well, maybe I should, it's just self-doubt. It's just killing the confidence. So, and the way to combat that is, for me, take action. And as soon as you start to take that first step, that first bit of action, putting that post out, doing that video, it all seems clearer, and your confidence starts to grow. So that's what happened for me. It was just, what do I need to do here? I need to take action. So I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And I did it. And if I don't look back in 6 months and cringe, then I haven't made progress fast enough.
That's a good one.
That's how I see it. Yeah.
I like that.
It's the best way to look at it, because otherwise you stay stagnant, you start going slow, as you want to look back and go, oh, what was I thinking? Because you've grown so much and you've developed, and you can go, okay, now what can I do? And then you do it again and again and again. And if you keep doing that, it's just a constant level of growth.
Hello, my name is Mate, and you have tuned into the 20th episode of the In-Betweeners Checkup. I'm joined today by Scott Hardiman, all the way over in the UK, who has very graciously said he will spend some time sharing with us, I guess, his message, his world, and I'd like to think a little bit of insight into how not only guys, but a lot of us can lead better lives in this world. So, Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you, and you can tell the audience a little bit more about yourself.
Cool. Yeah. So my name's Scott. I am a confidence coach for men and men that own businesses. And essentially, I help them take their business to the next level by boosting their confidence and overcoming their barriers, such as self-doubt and imposter syndrome, all of those nice experiences that we all face. But the people that I connect with, I've found have been male business owners. That's kind of the direction I've taken, and I'm really, really enjoying it. So yeah.
Glad to hear. And look, I mean, it takes a lot of confidence, I guess, to go into business for yourself in the first place. In terms of, I mean, do you assist people at that starting point, or are you more focused primarily on people who have been in that space for a little while? They've thought perhaps that they would rapidly ascend, and they're finding that they're in a bit of a rut?
It varies. It really does. I'm working with men that have just started a business, and they need that extra confidence to really take their business to the next level. But also, again, it's men that have been in business for a long while and are beginning to, with everything that's going on in the world, there's a lot of experiences that aren't exactly ideal. So it kind of challenges and creates these barriers, and it's about overcoming those barriers, realizing that actually you are on a good path, and stepping over that barrier into the next step. So yeah, it's a mixture of both. But I tend to work with smaller businesses rather than larger businesses at the moment. Not to say that won't change, but at the moment it's quite small, but starting, and businesses that I'd say that have been going for a while now. Yeah.
So I have to ask then, what gave you the confidence to move into the space, and what potentially areas were you lacking in confidence that created obstacles for you earlier in your life?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I was never a confident person at all. Child, toddler, whatever you want to say. Started at a very young age. It was that kind of, oh, he's just a sensitive boy. He's just not very confident. He doesn't come across as very confident. He's okay. He's just sensitive. But when you hear that on a regular basis, whether you take it in or not, it's going in unconsciously. And I was never confident up until, I'd say, a good few years ago, maybe about five years ago. I would not put myself into situations that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. I didn't feel like I could overcome that. I could be confident, stand my ground, and I'd always doubt myself. So it was something that I experienced very much so from a young age up until, like I said, not too long ago. I think there's a very, very strong correlation between low confidence and anxiety. And I developed anxiety. What can I say? It's not a nice time to suffer with anxiety. It must have been for a good 3 to 5 years. of just feeling very, very low, not sure what was happening, and that kind of prompted me to this is one of the reasons that I'm doing what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Wow. And look, I guess I'm keen, like, I don't want you to focus on the negative per se, but in terms of being stuck in that space, and I know, well, I haven't had severe anxiety as such, but when I sort of talk to people about how it feels in the body, to want that change is one thing, to actually create that change is another. Can I ask a little bit more as to how you actually went about that?
Yeah, so you may know, and a lot of people may know, but a lot of what we do in life is due to pain and pleasure. And when enough pain is created, often sort of kicks us into gear and we start to react and take necessary steps. So for me, I happened to be when I was in my early 20s. And at that time, especially, I mean, I'm in my 30s now, and at that time, it wasn't really talked about. Mental health wasn't really talked about as much as it is now. So I didn't really know what was going on. I just dealt with it, and life was not good. And it got to a point at a certain time I was out with my wife. So it went on for quite a few years. I was out with my wife, and we were going out for a meal, and I wasn't feeling comfortable with it. I'd always try and avoid those situations, and I had probably the worst anxiety attack that I'd ever had. And for me, that was just that moment that I thought, I cannot do this anymore. Something has to change. And from that point, I was okay. What do I do? And I just I put all my energy into finding out what I was going through, how I could overcome it. Got fascinated with the subject and started to find ways to deal with it. And I'm very big in my coaching. I'm a very big believer in, there are so many techniques out there. There are so many tools and techniques that you could try, but you've actually got to try them. The one that I try might not be for me, but guess what? There's another 1,000 that you can try. And I just kept going through it. What's going to work? What's not working? What's working? And I ended up getting to a place where I felt much more comfortable. My anxiety lowered, and then I could actually work on myself. It was like that fog cleared, and then that enabled me to then be able to help others.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And like, how do I say this? I guess you were in a situation where, with that anxiety, you were afraid to put yourself out there, and you were afraid, I guess, to fail or be vulnerable. And once that, I don't know if desire is the right word, but once that change in your mindset occurred, when you were like, this has to change and I'm going to do everything in my power to make it change, then it didn't matter if the tool didn't work or you failed, you just went on to another one and such like. And I think that mentality is really the way we need to look at all aspects of life at all times, if we can. And you know, that's not always easy because of what's happened in our past and because of the habits or the ideas that have been reinforced during our lives. And unfortunately, some people, I guess, they get to breaking point and they can't go any further down. And it's from that place that they rise. You know, I mean, you look at, California is not the greatest example at the moment, but these bushfires, and they destroy masses of land, but at the same time, that creates an environment for seeds to grow, you know, and from, I'm going to say, destruction or despair, light can still rise, as it were. It's, I don't know, it's hard.
Yeah,
but
it's so true. And one of the phrases that I heard, which just it resonated with me so much and it enabled me to really push forward, is, it's very simple. You probably heard it before, but failure is feedback. And if you fail, you just use it as an opportunity to grow. What can I learn from this? And you use it as feedback to then grow. And another thing I heard was, problems are a sign of life, and I want to live. So if you don't have problems, you're not living. That for me, again, I was like, oh wow, that is so important. And I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't been through those things.
Yes.
And as much as awful as it was, and I wouldn't wish on anyone, it has enabled me to, you could say, bounce back and do what I'm doing and grow from that. So yeah, one thing I would say that really stuck with me was failure as feedback. So every time I go, oh, I'm not too sure on this, well, hang on, why not? Because if it doesn't go the way that I want, it's just an opportunity to grow. And that's how I see it now.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think the great thing is because you've gone through that process yourself, you will be able to resonate that much more with the people that you're working with, as opposed to perhaps someone who is in a health field but hasn't necessarily experienced what they treating firsthand, and sometimes it can make it a little difficult for them to truly connect with the person that they're working with, and therefore the effectiveness of the treatment, whatever it may be. I guess when people come to you, and I'm thinking more generally speaking, and specifically the guys, I guess, are there more common patterns that you tend to see in those people?
Yeah, so with the men that I work with at the moment, it's very much about having someone to confide in and talk to. And we'll know that kind of that old saying is that men are quite closed off. They don't really speak, or not very emotional. And one of my clients said to me recently, I feel like I can let out some emotion now, which is great, because I'm not sure it's the case so much nowadays, but often in the past it was, men wouldn't show that. They'd be very, straight, I'm fine, I'm good. But now it's starting to turn, and I'm seeing a lot of that. And men just want to sort of talk, having that other person to talk to, whether it's a man or a woman, it really relaxes. And that's why coaching I think is awesome, because it does give that person the opportunity just to go, I had a bit of a tough weekend, just talk.
Yes.
And then go, what do you think of this? And then having someone say, well, this is what I think. And it's just nice to have that back and forth. So I'm finding that's kind of a theme at the moment, is the guys that I'm working with are just enjoying that connection with someone else and just getting things off their chest.
Yeah, that's great. And look, I mean, especially at the moment, I mean, people are under a lot of pressure, and there is that desire to, I don't want to say be able to unload as such, but be able to, I guess, connect with others, and whether it's isolation that limits, or whether it's because the other people in their lives are also under pressure and they don't necessarily want to burden them with more stuff. I think it's really important to have some form of healthy outlet, because otherwise people are going to numb that pain, and it might be drinking, it might be gambling, it might be, I don't know, whatever, but in essence, those actions will not help really deal with the underlying issues. That emotion, it needs to come out, and it needs to be expressed in a positive way, because if it's suppressed, it's going to come out negatively.
Yeah, and it comes in stress.
Yeah,
it's just a pure. I've said this so many times now. I kind of like this, and you may have heard it before, but I explain stress and anxiety, or sort of low confidence, in like a pint glass. So if you've got a pint glass or a bucket, throughout our life we add to that with stress. So it's a stress cup, stress pint glass. And throughout the stresses we have in life, whether it's falling over in front of people, it creates stress. Whether it's something happening within the family, losing your job, whatever it might be, it adds to that pint glass. And as you get to the top of that pint glass, if you don't let it out, if you're not the kind of person that can deal with stress very well, if you're not implementing these techniques, like I mentioned earlier, which we might talk about later, as mindfulness and trying to be relaxed and present, then you add to that stress cup. And if you're not good at dealing with it, it gets to the top, one drop, it could just be something so simple, and then you overflow. And when you overflow, it's really hard to get yourself back under control. So it's so important to have someone, I feel, to talk to hold you accountable, to give you things to do to improve yourself and your business, to reduce that chance of stress and anxiety and low confidence becoming even worse. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, 110%. Like, it's, and I kind of think, this dynamic isn't new as such, but I don't feel like coaching as a field has necessarily been around for a hugely long time, or if it has, it hasn't really completely been understood. And I think it's a great opportunity to help others in whatever they're facing at this time. You sort of touched on some of those tools that you use. I'm assuming that these were things perhaps you tried yourself and found you resonated with as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would always, I kind of have a process that we follow when I work with clients with regards to confidence is understanding our belief systems. That's one of the first things that we do. That's kind of could call it a technique, but it's something that in the coaching world is probably the go-to. But it's important, and you have to find the right person to enable you to get the best out of that.
Yes.
But mindfulness for me is huge. It's just being mindful of being present in the moment, because as soon as we start forward thinking, we create anxiety. As soon as we think about something in the past that didn't go very well, it can create feelings of regret, and that's not always good. So being present, like in this moment, I say this so much, but in this moment right now, you and I talking, looking at each other, not much to worry about, is there?
No,
But as soon as you start looking into the future and thinking, oh, what if this, what if that, then it creates that concern and that worry, and it's not good. So one of the first things that we do, I work with my clients, is mindfulness, and sometimes it's as simple as just stopping and counting your breath for a count of 10, and then carrying on with your day. I do that about 10 times a day.
Yeah.
Brings you back to the present moment.
Yes.
Makes you feel pretty good, to be honest. That's just one technique. That might work for some, like I said, might not for others, but there's so many out there that you can do.
Yeah. And look, I mean, big believer of being in that present moment, because in all fairness, it's the only true moment that exists. Everything else is just in the mind. And for myself, I'm a big believer of meditation, and I think everyone should do it. And if meditation hasn't worked for you, then perhaps you haven't found the right way to meditate. But I guess in terms of mindfulness practices, breathing, I mean, look, it's something we do every day, all the time. But it's incredible to see how many people don't really breathe properly, as it were. And you talked about that sort of pain and pleasure dynamic. And I sort of think of that fight or flight or rest and digest response. And often, we'll be rushing around and it's all shallow breathing, and we're not really oxygenating our lungs, and we're not really, I'm going to say, taking in what the body needs, and that will have an effect over time.
Sure. Yeah.
With regard to, I guess, mindfulness as a whole, what do you feel, how do you feel you can best incorporate it into one's life, generally speaking?
I would, as simple as it sounds, get people to every now and then just stop and don't do anything else, and do that maybe two or three times a day to start with. And it's amazing the impact that if you just stop and just look around and just, what can you hear, see, and feel? What does it feel like to sit there? Is there any wind? What can you hear? Hear any birds? What can you see? Can you see someone walking by? And you could, I suppose you could call it something along the lines of, how many times have you sat in a coffee shop and just looked up and people watched? Essentially, that's what it is. And if you do that, most of the worries just disappear, because in that moment there's nothing happening. It's just, you're just looking around and noticing what's there. What can you see, hear, and feel? So I would say do that once or twice or three times a day, and then as you start to feel more comfortable, as it starts to become more of a habit, you can start to increase that. But sometimes as simple as that, throughout the day, you could start by setting an alarm on your phone. Just every now and then, 3 times a day, 1 in the morning, 1 at lunch, 1 in the evening. Just alarm goes off, you go, okay, I'm just going to stop right now, and just stop and see where it goes.
Yeah, no, it's great. And like, I mean, you talked about that sort of sight and hearing and feel. I mean, we're engaging with the senses, and we're, I guess, listening to our body at that time, and we're out of our heads, we're out of our minds, and that's so important, because if you look at health in general, I feel too often we're not listening to our body, and it gives us warning signs, that things aren't quite right. But because we ignore them and just think, we'll be right and we'll get on, especially as men, we think we're tough as, and we're the strong providers and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, someone has a stroke, or someone has a heart attack, or someone has chronic fatigue or nervous breakdown or whatever the case may be. And they're like, well, where did that come from? And I was like, well, if you'd really stopped and listened to your body, it was screaming at you to slow down or to take a break or to change what you were doing, and you weren't listening. And look, that's one of the senses you mentioned, certainly listen to what's happening around you, but at the same time, listen to what's happening within.
Yeah. And that stems from awareness.
Yeah.
How having awareness. When I work with clients, we'll talk about some problems or challenges they've got, and as soon as we just bring that awareness to their thoughts, it changes the whole dynamic of the session, of how they move forward in their business, because having awareness allows you to make changes. Mm-hmm. If you don't listen, if you don't know what's going on in your mind, you won't have a clue. And I've actually done a video on this recently. It's just a short 1-minute video, which I'm going to be putting out on my social media. And it's about sort of being confident in social situations or when you're trying to promote your product or services. And how if you're low in confidence, you'll find yourself doing this. But if you have the awareness, then you can make changes. But often people low in confidence will go in a conversation with someone, oh, how are you? And then they won't listen. They'll just get stuck in their head. Because they're low in confidence, they'll just get stuck. Yeah. So you go, oh yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you? Oh, are they judging me? Do I feel like they're listening? What am I going to talk about next? Whereas if you just listen to the response, there's an opportunity for another question. There's an opportunity to go, oh, they watch Netflix. Oh, have you watched this? And then a conversation flows, whatever it might be. But when we're low in confidence and we doubt ourselves, we ask a question and then we get stuck in our head and we don't listen to the response. And then the conversation dies, and then it reinforces that belief of, oh no, I'm no good in social situations. So yeah, if I was to say anything, I don't know why I've lost my track of thought now, but if I was going to say anything, is to feel confident with someone in the moment, ask questions, but then listen, because listening allows you to then bounce back and ask more questions. So yeah,
I can't remember who it was, but somebody said we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth to listen twice as much as we speak.
Yeah, I heard that. That's great.
And I'm someone who's spent a lot of time in my head, to be fair, and hasn't always thrived in social situations. But when you truly listen to people, it's beautiful. Like it changes the whole essence of a conversation. Like you generally slow down in the way you talk. There's lots of silence, and it's not uncomfortable. It's just there's like an energy that resonates, and you hear sometimes the message behind the message. And when you look, as a coach, I think you can probably appreciate that, and you can sort of start to ask questions to uncover what's going on at a deeper level and raise someone's awareness, and ultimately do good for them and whoever you have conversations with. And I like working in recruitment. I wouldn't necessarily place everyone I worked with, but I like to think that I could leave everyone somehow better off than before I had a conversation with them. And sometimes all it took was truly listening to them.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And listening is that's why I love being a coach, because I listen and then ask questions. But I suppose I like to be more of I do that as well as giving advice if I feel like I need it. I don't just sit back and go, oh, okay. I go, have you thought about this? But for example, listening and having that awareness. One of my clients said, I'm forgetful, and he kept forgetting things. I'm forgetful. I always have been, and I imagine I always will be. And I said to him, okay, so what's your definition of forgetful? And he said, well, someone that forgets dates and times. I said, okay. And he said, oh, but actually, I'm actually pretty good at remembering dates and times. Oh, okay, cool. So your definition of forgetful is someone that forgets dates and times, but you're actually pretty good at that. He said, yeah. And then he said, and I said to him, when did this start for you? Well, just after university. When I came out of university, I started to find that I was quite forgetful. I said, oh, so you haven't always been forgetful then? He said, no. And that one conversation we had, that awareness, that change and those questions that were asked based on that belief that he had about him being forgetful completely squashed it, and things changed for him. But that's having that awareness. And if we all have that awareness, if we create that within us, we can start to dissect these thoughts that might be running through our minds that aren't helpful. So yeah, going back to that awareness thing, 100%, it's just so important.
Yes, yes. And I mean, if you look, like, for example, someone who's an alcoholic, if they don't see that they have a problem, then they can't change it. There's not that awareness there to be able to do something about it. And a lot of us are completely, I mean, I'm going to say we're unconscious to a lot of those ideas that are just circulating in the background. And yeah, I feel coaches and, well, yeah, no, actually pretty much just coaches really are in a prime position to assist people in that space. I definitely think counselling serves a purpose in a slightly different dynamic. And mentors, again, are probably more advice focused. But I mean, the whole reason I got into coaching is because I felt that I have so much more to offer in that space than working in recruitment. And so far, the feedback I've received is certainly fulfilling that. But I didn't have the confidence for some time to be able to take that step. We'll see how we go. I might be having to get in touch with you in 6 months' time when I had another block as such. But I guess on that note, do you work with people internationally, or you've sort of primarily focused on local clients?
Yeah, all over. That's I suppose the benefit of Zoom.
Yes,
or the
true.
internet. It's just nice. I love working with people all over the world. For sure. Yeah, it's nice, and we can do it. So why not make the most of it? Because there's so many people. There are so many coaches out there. There are so many people out there that are struggling. So many business owners, so many men, women, and they might only in their local environment have people they don't resonate with, they don't click with. Whereas having this as an opportunity to see whether there's someone else that they can connect with is powerful. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you, Scott?
Best way is you can go onto my LinkedIn, which is you just search Scott Hardiman, or you can go onto my website, which is scotthardimancoaching.com. That's it.
Cool. Right. And if there was one piece of wisdom that you could leave the audience with today, what would that be?
Oh, that's a very, very good question. I think I've already said.
Yeah, you've said a lot to be here.
Definitely one, failure is feedback. And I would say for confidence, take action. Because the more action you take, the more you learn, the more you grow, the more competent you become at that thing that you want to get better at. And as soon as you become more competent in it, you become more confident.
Thank you very much.